Hi, I'm Dr Demeter and I'm here with Helena Norberg-Hodge, and we've just had a beautiful weekend in Tasmania. So Helena, thank you so much for being here in Tassie.
Thank you for organising all this.
Yeah, thank you. There's been two big projects that have been happening. One has been at that kind of in the community through Environment Tasmania, through the Fluxus Energy and Climate campaign, and the other has been here at the farm, Magical Farm Tasmania. So we've been exploring different approaches to creating local changes through food and energy systems. And I thought maybe just ask you, what are your reflections on the time here?
Yeah, well, I really got the impression that Tasmania has some amazing leadership, and particularly from the grassroots, a real commitment to try to work with nature. And I feel very optimistic about the idea that with 500,000 people on this island, there's fabulous potential. There's also a big threat from the global economy and from crazy leadership that wants to move everything in the direction of electronics and a techno future. But I think there's a deep nature connection here that I'm very impressed with. I, of course, don't know it that well, but everything I saw this weekend made me feel that.
That's good. Well, maybe we have a discussion about economics for the earth dinner with you and Christine Milne and Alana Mann as facilitating. And it was in the Peacock Theatre, and there was about 70 guests, and we were talking about economics in relation to policy making and the way that our society is structured. And I think that you shone light on things that we're reacting, it seems, to a lot of issues on the ground, like salmon, forests, energy, all these crises happening. But there's something quite clear that you see that's causing all of this. And I was hoping you'd share that, and even maybe we could, hopefully not to kind of ask too much of a harder question, how do we deal with that situation?
Yeah. Well, the situation is that Tasmania, like every other part of the world, is actually being pressured by a global economic system. And that system is being supported by our governments because they have been led to believe, more or less forever, that supporting global trade, subsidizing it, and deregulating it, freeing it up, is a way to grow the economy. Actually, that is leading worldwide to increased poverty, much bigger gap between rich and poor, and massive environmental destruction. But this blind commitment to trade means that they remove regulations from global traders. And that means in money as well as goods. So it's banks as well as the Monsantos and Coca-Colas of this world, Walmart and so on. And they, instead of taxing them, they subsidize that. They subsidize the global businesses. And in the meanwhile, everybody, you and I, and businesses at the local, regional, and even national level are punished with heavy taxes and more heavy regulation. So we need to look at these three mechanisms that governments use to steer us into a future away from nature, away from democracy. And we need to look at the grassroots to see how, when things are more human scale, when the community's involved, when there's a real knowledge about the specifics of your river, your trees, your mountaintops, things work better. So there is a proliferation of grassroots stuff happening here in Tasmania that I generally refer to as localization. And we need to ensure that our government starts shifting these key instruments what they tax, what they subsidize, and what they regulate to support the local instead of the global. So that's the main message that I would like to impart. And I'd also like to point out that once you start looking to the grassroots and look for what are the local human scale systemic initiatives that help us rebuild the community fabric and rebuild. So it's very important, the reconnection to one another, but also the deeper connection to nature. We're actually on track to come back to how we evolved, because we evolved in community, closely connected to nature. We are participating now in the top-down system. We are threatening to destroy life itself. So we have a bit of an emergency that we need to be aware of, and at the same time there's so much positive that's also going on.
And you've mentioned tax, subsidise, regulate now. That's the third time I've heard you say across the two events and now. And I was trying to remember them and now I've got them. And yes, so for instance, salmon. In Tasmania, they didn't pay tax last year on 4 billion. So imagine the potential of the local economy. There's locked up money that's going, as you say, it's very clear, to the global elites and on industry, which is so destructive to the environment. It's madness, really, isn't it?
Yeah. But also, I want to remind you to always remind people too that it's very destructive of your job, your financial security. And so the key element now is to make it really clear to people that we're not just talking about the destruction to the water and to the trees. We're talking about the destruction to you. We're talking about the truth that you and your children are having to work harder and harder and harder just to put food on the table, just to pay for the rent or mortgage. And that's happening worldwide. The trend is there. And another trend that's there is an epidemic of depression. So what we're talking about here is just as much about improving human well-being as ecological. And they're, of course, inseparable anyway. But we need to really come back to a big picture where we see the connections so that we can link together across the divide of some activism that might be focused on poverty, that might be focused on mental health, climate, biodiversity, forests, salmon. All of these categories are important issues, but we need to link them to the big picture of the economic system that is causing the problems and the economic shift that systemically can solve them. It sounds very simplistic, but it's the truth. They are systemically linked, and that's why we have to look at the systemic solution. So I call localization a solution multiplier, and that's what it is. It's win-win-win.
And so this is an area where we both have a passion, and that's local food systems.
Yes.
This is a kind of integral way to achieve that local economy, the healthy food into us, because it's the closest thing to nature. It goes inside our bodies. Our stomachs are even, it's the whole thing. So it's also coming together socially, mental health. It's so holistic.
Yeah.
And that's where this idea came through the Fluxus campaign with Environment Tasmania of let's just try and experiment and give it a go. But the community renewal scheme and its policy language, the government sets up a package, then they create a scheme, and then they carve up the money and send it out to local governments. And so what we are attempting at Environment Tasmania, and through like a network, a mycelium network of community members and major like players, I suppose, in food and energy who want to see a different economy, to create a community renewal scheme that unlocks this money and says, hey, government, how about you tax, subsidise and regulate in a different way? And so addressing food and energy in that mix. So I just wanted to put it out there. Like, what are your thoughts on this kind of like, taking it head on in this way? And could you give some advice on how we do this?
The biggest advice there is that we have to let more people know that it's going to be beneficial to them, to their livelihoods, to their jobs, and to the environment. And so that we build more of a coalition of people who will support it. So there'll be a strong voice in favor of it. That's the key.
And it's interesting to go, let's go deeper into that. So local economics, it's Michael Schuman's stats, isn't it? Did you want to share a little bit about that? You know, when money is actually spent locally, it is good for prosperity.
It's good for everybody, and studies show that when you buy something from a local independent shop, the money circulates in the economy. When you buy from a big chain or one of the global elements, it basically just leaves your community. So there's this wonderful way that we can actually work for something that's good for us, good for the community, and good for the environment. And I think this, particularly for this podcast, we should be stressing that for anyone who wants to get involved, the most strategic and the most important area to look at is food. There's nothing else that every human needs every day, usually 3 times a day, and in the global food system that our governments are supporting through the way they tax, subsidize, and regulate. In that global system, we are talking about the most horrendous waste. We're talking about things being imported and exported at the same time. And that the food that comes from the other side of the world is cheaper than local food. And that's happening worldwide. We're talking about the global food economy contributing more to climate change than any other activity or industry. We're talking about that economy contributing to the mountains of plastic. And remember that everything you buy in the supermarket is basically about single-use plastic. But we now have corporate think tanks that get us to only focus on our individual shopping habits. Be very careful of that, and try instead to link up to local food initiatives. You can support them either by shopping there or volunteering, or just raising awareness about how important they are and how we need local councils and local governments to start changing some of the regulations to make that easier. We are in a situation now where the food in the farmers market may be a bit more expensive than in the supermarket, but that's because your taxes subsidize the supermarket food. So try to get the voice out there to change those subsidies, but right now as an individual, you can join a community effort to build up more local food through farmers markets, CSAs, permaculture initiatives. There are a whole range, and almost without exception, they are healing because they build community. They restore biodiversity by shortening the distances. They are the most central systemic thing you can do to reduce climate emissions of all kinds. Fundamentally also, the shorter distance from the farm to the market means that the market is demanding diversity, not monoculture. And monoculture is a foundational in the global economy. Bigger and bigger monocultures that are disastrous, that go against nature. And whether it's salmon factories or soybean plantations, whatever they are, monoculture is anti-life. And that leads then to demand for chemicals, it destroys the soil. So reversing that to localize, diversify, build community initiatives is just win, win, win.
And I love how and as you know, I'm involved with the seed library, crop swap. I love all of these beautiful community bottom up.
Yeah.
It's human led, community led. It's just happening.
Yeah.
And then I really worry about some of those like suburbs near where I grew up, in the Dandenong Ranges in Victoria. There's huge, it's the biggest growth corridor. It was beautiful agricultural land that's been destroyed by horrendous developments. And then my experience in local government and kind of seeing how, how they're kind of, there's people inside local, state and federal. There's some good people, like there's all good people, but there's this system that's just a machine.
Yeah.
But there is a chess game at play in a sense of the way of that, what happened in the Huon Valley Food Hub. There was some opportunity for me to do some permaculture or gardening within that system, you could say, and redirect the money from a document to write about food resilience and actually implement it and then put in this test of co-designing with the community and unlocking that money. And so like on that level of this tax, subsidise, regulate, I think there is a way to chip away at the machine as such, and at every chance try to redirect the brief. And you must check out a database on the internet of food policy documents across Australia. This is a disaster. This is a replication of pretty much your message. Just everyone take note of what Helena has to say. We don't need, 1,000 government documents that have cost millions and millions of dollars. What we need is that money to be spent on seed, soil, people, to educate how to grow and subsidise the small growers with the greenhouses. That's who we should be subsidising.
Well, also be a bit careful of the greenhouses, because they're pushing high-rise greenhouses that will be AI run.
Yeah,
and be aware that small diversified farms can produce vastly more per unit of land and water. They are far more efficient. But our economic system, the way it calculates things, doesn't show that. Because our governments are subsidizing energy-intensive, long-distance, monoculture, and then telling us, we're so many people, we need bigger and bigger in order to feed the world. We need more and more technology to feed the world. We have a crowded planet. We have more people than perhaps we would like to have. To now dump them and to substitute their care, their concern, their heads, hearts, and hands with machines means all the time using more of the earth, more minerals, more mining, more energy, more waste and toxicity created, more cancer, more neurological illness. Yeah. Why? In order to create profit at the top. Now, our government people don't know that. And most of us are not being ecologically or economically educated enough. So we're just sort of often believing, oh yeah, there's so many people, we need bigger and bigger farms, and the prices in the supermarket, they're cheaper, and of course people can't afford to buy expensive food. So because we don't see the bigger picture of the economy,
you raise
we
a
fall
good
in
point.
the trap of supporting this system.
It's human. It's a very good point. And actually, I've just picked up something. It's conditioned. The greenhouse. This is a way that I negotiate. because it's infrastructure. And
Yeah.
of course, that infrastructure is connected to that. But I use that
Yeah.
as a way
Yeah.
to negotiate,
Yeah.
but no
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
We need to invest in humans.
In human beings.
It's as simple as that.
And let's remember that only about 1% are farming. And very often when I talk about this, people will say to me, well, I don't want to farm. I wouldn't want to farm either in most situations. However, I've seen all around the world, even in China, in America, in Sweden, where I come from, where you have small diversified farms with lots of people working together, and where there's a connection between them and the people who buy the food. I'm seeing some of the happiest, healthiest people I find anywhere on the planet. I'm seeing doctors, lawyers, particularly computer experts who have left their jobs in order to farm. I'm seeing a lot of young people who actually want to farm. When I say a lot, it's more than 1% of the population, and we only have 1% on the land as it is. So if we could bring another percent back, we would be creating more thriving ecosystems and thriving, healthy young people. Healthier food. As Emily was saying, we know now about the earth and the health of the soil being connected to our gut biome. We are connected. Science is proving that. Let's really start moving in that direction and supporting local food systems.
We've talked about economics for the Earth event, but we not so much on festive agriculture. That happened yesterday at Magical Farm, and we had beautiful discussion with the group, and we had music, we did singing, we did a mycelium exchange with local farmers, a seed library, we had a demonstration crop swap, and it was sort of an idea of the future, what it could be. We were in a time machine in a sense, as you say in one of your 5 R's.
Yeah.
It was a day of rejoicing and coming together, and it was renewed. It was a renewed way.
Yeah.
And we were kind of living it yesterday in this temporal zone.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to reflect a little bit on that, even the power of creating temporal zones, even if it's not a permanent zone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the wonderful thing is that these coming together and the joy that comes from that, the creativity, we were also weaving baskets and learning essentially ancient ways. I wrote a book called Ancient Futures, what I learned from this indigenous culture that I lived in for many years, well actually for over 45 years. And I had the privilege to see a truly functioning local ancient economy with the happiest, healthiest people I had ever encountered. And I'm seeing that this is being reborn around the world. And it's these, what I would call ancient futures micro trends, where we're just coming back to what our bodies, our hearts, our souls know we need. It's led by women. And Emily has led here and created a group of people who are sharing and caring.
It's a group of women.
In this earth-based way that is truly inspiring. And I don't, it is in a sense a taste of the future, because in people's everyday lives, they're pulled into a sort of prison of a hard job that is usually pretty meaningless and that's there to pay the rent. And we don't have the time to enjoy life. So the vision of the future that we need to move towards is to realize there are 2 paths into the future. One of them is being pushed on us top down, not by evil people, but by people who are allowed to believe that their idea of growth benefits us, when it's clearly just benefiting some billionaires. And we're getting poorer. Everywhere in the world we can see that. So how can they go on talking about this growth? But they are. So we need to become stronger and clearer about how that growth doesn't benefit us in terms of jobs, in terms of anything. On the contrary. On the other hand, if you start really studying the localization movement and see what comes from that reconnection in community, see what happens when you support small independent businesses, particularly small independent farms, because that's where we can make the biggest shift. And it's in a way the most urgent, because whether it's going to be climate crisis or financial crunch, having food security, as much food diversity in your region, it's in your interest and it's in the interest of the planet. So supporting that worldwide is what we need to do. And we're having a summit in Ladakh or Little Tibet this September that I hope people will think of coming to. It's up on the Tibetan plateau in a part that belongs to India. Many people think, oh, isn't that a bad thing to do, to bring foreigners there? And how can you be encouraging people to fly? There's the carbon footprint. They don't realize that more than ever we need deep cultural exchange, dialogue, and collaboration globally to support these mycelial ancient futures changes that are occurring around the world. So in many ways, what Emily's doing here is far more important than people realize. It's far more important, and it's linked to what is actually a global movement.
I'd just like to thank Helena Norberg-Hodge so much for coming this weekend. And it's been a pleasure and so insightful, and also very inspired to be involved in the localisation movement in more detail with this community of people that has come together with local futures. And we will weave Tasmania into that so we can have knowledge exchange between all of these different communities around the world to do the best we can do to make our planet and our communities healthier and happier and prosperous. Thank you. There is also a great resource where you can find out about the 5 R's and all of the work that Helena does, and that's on localfutures.org. And also Magical Farm last year, we participated in World Localisation Day and we ran a local feast. And it's on the 21st of June, but also throughout the whole month of June, there are localisation activities happening all around the world. So let's do more in Tasmania and during that month, and maybe we even watch a film, The Economics of Happiness, and it's a nice winter activity, and maybe even do some sharing on some of Helena's books, Ancient Futures. And which is the other one, Helena? Local is our future, and Life After Progress. So we're just on our way. Everything's summing up now, and Helena is heading off. So she's just getting ready. Thank you so much, everyone, for being involved this weekend, and particularly to the group of women that are supporting me in this beautiful work. And yes, we'll see you more soon.